Have you ever traveled abroad? Well, if you have, you know that it's a lot easier to communicate in a foreign country when you know the language. So, have you ever considered that your salespeople are speaking the wrong language? This is Sales Untraining, a very different kind of sales podcast. 3 out of 4 salespeople are failing. They're falling short of their revenue. Why doesn't sales training work? That's what this sales podcast is about. It's your weekly sales strategy guide designed to rewire your sales brain. Welcome to Sales Untraining. I'm Kelly Riggs. Really good to have you on board. And if this is your first time to listen or view the podcast, I hope you'll take the time to like it, subscribe to it, and most importantly, share it with someone else, because this conversation needs to spread exactly what is wrong with sales training. No, listen, sales training, absolutely necessary, but systemically, we're making so many mistakes and doing it so backwards that we create a lot of our own problems. In tennis, I think they call that an unforced error. Boy, are we making some unforced errors. Well, one of those unforced errors, as I introduced in the opening, has to do with language. You know, it's really interesting. I've traveled abroad many times. I've been to several different foreign language speaking countries. It's always easier to communicate when you know a little bit about the language. So when I was in Spain, when I was in Mexico, I know a little Spanish, just enough to be dangerous. But while I'm there, I'm constantly trying to find a new phrase, a new word. I'm trying to, a situation that I was in, I'm trying to find a better way to communicate that so that the person I'm talking to, I can communicate effectively. That's kind of the whole point, isn't it? Is if you improve the conversation, if you improve the dialogue, if you understand the language, it's really easier to get the outcome that you would like to have. Well, have you thought about that in selling? Listen, I want to suggest to you that you're teaching your salespeople the wrong language. You're teaching them the language of product. Oh, yes, no doubt about it. Unless you are the very, very rare exception, all of your training begins and almost ends with product training. So they're learning product. They're learning the language of product. Oh, and they're learning why it's so much better than the competition and superior in every way, has much more innovative features, does a much better job, has higher quality, better service. Is your customer bored yet? Yeah, I suspect they are. You know why? You're not speaking their language. It's really easy once you kind of focus on it to say, man, I get that. That makes a lot of sense. Let me ask you a question. What language does your customer speak? Good question. Well, first off, let's start with this premise. Do you realize that you're about 1%, probably less, but let's call it 1% of their existence? You are such a small fraction of what they do every day, the challenges they face every day. As a manager or leader, they're dealing with people issues every single day, vendor issues, customer issues, operational issues, and everything in between. They're constantly trying to evolve, learn, grow, develop their team, their company, their product offering, their marketing and customer support, and on and on and on it goes. That's what they care about. They speak the language of business. They speak the language of the country they live in, which is their company and their issues and their challenges. Your product, even if it's a major acquisition, is still a fraction of what they do every day. And you, as a salesperson, even if you have an incredible relationship with them, you are a fraction of their relationships. When I was in the orthopedic business, I had accounts that I spent a lot of time with. From my perspective, I was over there maybe 3 times each month, doing something, delivering something, showing something. I was intersecting with them, a couple of hours a month. And these were my best accounts. A couple of hours a month? Let's call it 4 hours a month. And that's way too generous. But out of 160, 170 hours of their business each and every month, you see what I mean? Very, very small percentage, 1, 2, 3%. And yet from our perspective, our product and our customers are our entire world. In their world, your company product salesperson is a fraction. And we show up and we speak a different language. So it's very difficult to communicate. We're in different areas. We're talking products and features and our nomenclature and, all of the things that we use. And admittedly, some of our language relates to that customer. It relates to what they do. It has to. But are we leading with the language that they're very comfortable with? Give you an example. When I started in sales 100 years ago, the first product I sold was office equipment. It was specifically copiers. And at that point in time, a copy machine was revolutionary. The first copier, you know the name, Xerox. And then Xerox began to get competitors. We were one of those. I sold a product from a company called Minolta. And they were coming out of the evolution of copiers. They were coming out of roll paper and liquid toner to, dry toner, regular paper, and edge-to-edge copies. It was a whole nother world. Think AI back in the day. That was the step. It was revolutionary. So I start with a company, very young, and they teach me what? Product. Teach me all about the product. How our process works and how it, prints edge-to-edge copies, and it has 2 different trays, one for 8.5 by 11 and one for 8.5 by 14. And if you really went crazy, you could have the 11 by 17. Well, that was a bigger model, so we had to step up in price. And you got faster speeds, and you could print so many copies a minute. Hang on, wait for it. 12 copies a minute for a machine that cost $3,500. Wow. Yeah, I was getting 15% of that when I could make a sale. Everything about it, all the way you could fix it and add toner and replace things. And, it was just amazing. And admittedly, it made for a great presentation. It did. But it required that they put all of that information into their language. They had to translate copier, Minolta, into business use, how we do it. So yes, after a while, I began to get familiar with, how the copier might be used and, what problems it might solve. And all. This all sounds foreign now because it's as natural as a glass of water. But let's transfer into one of my later sales jobs in orthopedics. Now we get extraordinarily complex because we're dealing with surgeons and surgery and medical language and the glossary of terms that goes with surgery, therapy, post-operative work, communicating with the doctor. So you had to learn not only the language of medicine, surgery, orthopedics, biomechanics, but you had to know something about the business of medicine, or you skipped over a whole lot of things that were terribly important to the doctor. And so the way you were trained, typical sales training, here's our product, here's the competitor. The original, Lenox Hill, named after Lenox Hill Hospital in New York City. The very first knee brace, one of the primary products that I sold, the competitor was worn by a guy by the name of Joe Namath. And everybody knew Joe Namath, the quarterback of the New York Jets, winner of Super Bowl III, brash, aggressive winner. Well, the doctors at Lenox Hill put this brace on him, and it became the Lenox Hill brace. That's what we're competing against. So what did we do? We talked brace. We talked the language of our company and the product against the language of their product. Doctors don't care. Doctors speak the language of therapeutic modalities and patient outcomes and insurance reimbursement and efficacy in surgery and all kinds of things that if you didn't know any of those things, you weren't speaking their language. You weren't communicating effectively. Same thing happens all the time in sales when you think about it. And this is exactly where sales training should begin. it should begin with the language of the customer. If you're going to go to a foreign country and you want to communicate effectively, start learning the language. Absolutely the same is true in selling. If you want to communicate effectively and create understanding with your customer, I have to speak their language. What is that language? Business. It's the language of their day-to-day existence. It's managing operations and equipment and budgets and processes and strategic plans. It's managing people and vendors and customers. And it's understanding how your product fits into all of that and the problems, challenges, issues that you need to solve in order to be effective with them. It is amazing how quickly customers dial in and listen and engage in conversation when you speak their language. I saw it all the time when we traveled abroad. You start speaking English and, if they spoke a little, you'd get I'm not sure. But the minute you spoke a little bit of their language, first question out of their mouth, oh, you speak our language. Oh, you see them brighten up. You see them try to help. In fact, one of the things that we found anecdotally, and I've had it confirmed with many, many people who've traveled abroad, is people who live in foreign countries, when Americans come there and try to speak their language, they have a great appreciation for it. They're much more willing to help. Does that sound familiar? When you talk to customers, if you learn to speak their language, they're much more willing to open up. That's my experience. Well, coming up next, I'm going to show you exactly how you can begin to immerse your salespeople in the language of your customer, the language of business. Stay with us. I'm Kelly Riggs, host of the Sales Untraining podcast. A couple of quick questions for you. Do you hire salespeople? Is sales turnover far too high in your organization? Do you struggle to find A players for your sales team? Well, these are very common questions, and there is a better way to hire. I'm a partner with Objective Management Group, OMG, and they have been assessing sales candidates for over 30 years. In fact, they've assessed over 2.5 million salespeople. Now, this is a very different type of assessment. First thing out of your mind is it another behavioral assessment? Is it a psychometric tool? Is it a personality quiz? No, nothing like that. It is based on 21 very specific sales competencies. And you need to listen to this. This is crazy. It is 91% predictive of sales performance. That's right, 91% predictive. You can't even make a claim like that without the science behind it. Listen, if you struggle to find the right people, or if you just need a lot more help in the hiring process and making sure you're getting in front of the right people to hire, please email me, kelly@bizlockerroom.com. Oh, by the way, and you can absolutely try it for free, and it has a guarantee. kelly@bizlockerroom.com. Back to the show. Welcome back to Sales Untraining. Again, I'm Kelly Riggs. Really glad to have you on board as we continue the conversation about the many aspects of sales training. Today, we're talking about the language of your customer, not the language of selling, the language of your customer, which frankly should be the language of selling, shouldn't it? Doesn't that make sense? If we want to influence people to use our product or service, it's always a lot easier when we get interested in them and speak the language that they're familiar with and make everything that we do fit. Well, how do you do that in the sales training process? I call it customer immersion. You have to begin with the idea that if I want them to understand, the salesperson that is, if I want them to understand the product, the service, the things that we do, the first thing to do is to immerse them in the world of the customer. Well, how to do that? Number one, first off, put them in front of your best customers with a product manager, a marketing manager, a top salesperson. You as the sales leader, all of those are good choices, maybe all of the above. But what do you do when you go there is is really critical. It's not just go and see, oh, there's our equipment. That's amazing. They're a great customer, great logo for us to talk about when we're telling people you should buy from us because another company does. Not at all. Okay, first off, put them in front of top customers. And when I say customers, I don't mean the company. I mean the actual contacts. Let them have conversations with the end user, the person who made the purchasing decision, as many people as possible, so they begin to create a context around the product that you sell. They see it live and in living color. It's working and it's producing what it's supposed to, and they see people operating that equipment or enjoying the service, whatever it is that you sell, but you put them right there in the picture, in the moment, in the movie, if you will. The second thing is you prepare a whole list of questions for them to ask. Very simple questions like, what kinds of problems do you encounter? What kinds of products are you creating or outcomes are you creating with our product? How does it fit into your long-term process? Who's involved in operating it and why? What kinds of challenges do you have with upkeep, maintenance, repairs, etc., if all of that applies? What kinds of outcomes does it create? Understand the numbers, if there are numbers, the efficiency, the throughput, the outcomes, the return on investment. Yeah, we're starting with that. We're not starting with product. We get in front of a customer, number one, more than one, multiple customers, and don't try to show them your entire product line. As an aside, let's focus on one, maybe two primary products or a primary product line, but because a new salesperson can't learn 35 products at once. They can't memorize an entire catalog of SKUs. They just can't do it. So many of the companies that I work with, they manufacture, distribute, sell incredibly complex equipment. You can't expect a salesperson to pick all of that at once. Let's pick the most important product, maybe two. Let's focus there. Get them in front of those customers, 3, 4, 5 different customers with a lot of questions. And then we debrief. Number 3, debrief coming out of it. What did you learn? Spit it back out to me. Tell me what you learned, what you saw, how it works, and then you begin to refine that. But in their minds, they've seen those products at work. They know exactly how they fit into a customer. They've been having conversations with the customer. What language is the customer speaking? Not product, not your product. They're speaking the language of application and usage and implementation and integration into what they do, their processes. The more I understand as a salesperson the environment in which my product will be used, the better understanding I have and the easier it will be to communicate it to future prospects. Now, number 4, now go get in front of a product. But let's do something a little differently. Instead of spec sheets or SDS sheets or catalogs or all of that kind of thing, even when you're showing actual product demonstrations, how about you have that salesperson take pictures? In most cases, this is not a problem. I know that it will be on occasion. Customers don't want you taking pictures, but just pictures of how it works and, without revealing anything important, so that they can refer back and say, now this is the actual product. Here's what it looks like in operation, in usage. Do you remember what they were doing here? Do you remember how they used it? Why was that important? What kinds of outcomes were they creating? Do you know how much easier it is to learn and retain information when you can put it into context? And what is that context? It is the language of your customer. It's the language of business. And by the way, as an aside, we can extend this to general business understanding. And when you understand how companies work and run and what makes them profitable and how to look at P&L statements, or at least understand the basic ideas of how you create profit and what contributes to it and what doesn't. All of those things, fixed cost, variable cost. When salespeople understand all of that, they are infinitely more credible to a customer. Think about it. The language of business. That's the language that your customer speaks. I'll see you next time.
Sales Untraining is a production of Business Locker Room and Pod About It Productions. Music and editing by Doug Branson. To get more Kelly, visit bizlockerroom.com.